guys, so before we start, if this is the first time that you've watched one of these episodes, just click on the little exclamation mark that's popping up so you can go back to episode number 1 and just start watching from there. If you've been watching for a while, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and this just lets you, and don't forget the bell button too, and that just lets you know when I'm releasing videos. Alright guys, let's get into the episode. Okay guys, so episode number 5, and I had a very interesting day yesterday because I went and visited 3 different violin makers in Copenhagen after basically just having some discussions in the comments of one of my videos that I made about Reddit, so the subreddit violinists, and a lot of the guys came in and basically said, you know, they didn't agree with me, and that's perfectly fine, and I kind of came up with some pretty strong parts of my arguments. But one thing that I did realize is that I didn't have much experience in actually going to a violin shop, and I also think that like a violin shop, say in the US or Britain, maybe is different to a violin shop here in Denmark, and so I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go and see what that's all about. And so I took a trip to Copenhagen, and the first shop I went into was a little boutique master violin maker, and basically it was terrifying. It was terrifying. I walked in and I gave him prices at around $3,000, $3,000 US, and he almost laughed at me. He pretty much said he didn't even have any violins that cheap to me, which was like, whoa, okay. So the first shop I walked into, and also guys, I couldn't do any filming in these shops. Like I just have to really respect their privacy. Like even some of these guys are not even online, so they really just do cater to, you know, the professionals in Europe. So the first guy, pretty much I just left with my tail between my legs. It was very embarrassing. And the next one was much more helpful. I walked in, and again, this was his workshop. Like I walked in, and I pretty much walked through his stock of violin and cello cases and boxes full of other things. So it was very much a workshop, and I went inside. I walked into his through his workshop, you know, his little storage space, and into his workshop, and there he pulled out about 5 violins. And again, like I quoted around $2,000, and he brought out, you know, 2,500 violins all the way up to 10,000, and I gave him a bit of a play, and honestly I couldn't even tell the difference between a 2,000 and a 10,000 violin, and even my violin. Like I couldn't tell the difference between my cheap violin and their expensive ones. I'm sure there is a difference, but I couldn't. So the next thing he did though is he heard me playing fiddle and not violin. So he brought out a much darker sounding, much sort of like beat up sort of violin or a fiddle, and he gave it to me, and I played it, and it was just like instantly I could hear the difference between all the other violins that I played and this fiddle, and it sounded amazing. It was so dark and so rich, and you know, it was like, it's worth like $2,500, and it was amazing. But again, like I wasn't there to find like my forever violin. I was there to try and understand what it would be like as a day 1, hour 1 beginner violinist trying to find your violin. And again, like it was, maybe I'm just not good with people, but also like it was very intimidating. Very intimidating to just stand in there with all these expensive violins. And so I started asking, okay, how do you what do you do when a newbie violinist comes in? What do you do? And you know, he talks about stuff and he says, you know, recommend around like, you know, $1,000 violin, stuff like that. And straight away I'm just going, man, like how disconnected are these people from like the majority of people playing violin? Like the majority of people playing violin can't afford $1,000 violin or even an $800 violin to see if they like what they're doing. Like, and as I said to him, it's like, how do you know, you know, you spend that money, like I can't come back and give this back to you, or we're gonna have like a confrontation if I have to bring this violin back because I'm not interested in playing violin, and ask for a refund. And he goes, you know, oh, well, you rent. And I said, yeah, but I have a huge problem. Like, in today's world, you shouldn't be renting anything, like, except for an apartment. And renting an apartment, you should be saving for a house. Like, renting is so dumb. Like, I don't even rent. And I'm a fucking broke-ass fucking janitor. Like, I live in an off-grid house because rather than renting, paying someone else's mortgage, I wanted to, you know, have a light at the end of the tunnel mortgage for a $40,000 off-grid house. Like, this is my house in a couple of years. I own it. And then when I sell it, yeah, it's mine. I mean, you know, the only thing that's really going over is the interest that I'm paying on my very short loan. So fundamentally, like, renting is so against my religion of money. So again, digressing. I jumped straight in and I was like, come on, all right, what do I do? And he said, all right, here's the name of a guy, go see this guy. And so I went over to, so if you've ever been to Copenhagen, it's literally like a stone's throw away from Tivoli. It's like right on Tivoli. And walked into this little boutique shop, and this guy's like, yeah, you can rent here. And his English was good, but his use of words were good enough that I could understand, but my Danish girlfriend, who is like fluent English, couldn't keep up. And again, we had this miscommunication where she was thinking he was saying, you rent this violin, and I was understanding that he was saying you can rent to buy this violin. So of course, you know, my girlfriend wasn't happy about that because again, it's against our belief in money. And yet I was understanding that this little boutique violin with a violin maker owner was telling me that I can have myself a half decent, it's not handmade, I don't think, but it's a half decent German made violin, which I'm sure I can get off the internet. Again, and this is my thought, I was thinking I can probably get this off the internet for cheaper. But he said, I can rent to buy this German violin, but, and this is the good part, this is where guys have read it, this is where I'm willing to change my argument. Because he said to me this, you can rent to buy this around $1,000 German made or possibly Chinese made violin. But as you're doing your repayments, that money that you pay for rent can go towards a more expensive violin later. So if you come back in a year and say, I want like a dark, richer sounding violin, can you find me one? And he finds you one that's say worth $3,000. The rent that you've paid over that years is placed towards your new violin. That's awesome. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of shit that will stop people from buying off the internet. If they know that they can hand back the rented violin, which will be swapped, and then you pay a little bit extra, maybe you had the violin for like a year and a half, the money that you accumulate from that year and a half then goes towards your expensive violin. That's something I can get behind. That is good money. That's smart. That's smart business for him as well, because he has all these violins and he says some of them are donated to him. So he's getting free violins, which he's then renting out. And and the amount of people, and this is what he said to me as well, the amount of people who come back after a couple of months and say that the child doesn't want to play anymore, they don't want to play anymore. He says like 95%. And then there's that 1% who want to buy it. So he literally, even though he's doing all these favors for the community, it never puts him out of pocket. So it's definitely something that I'm looking into. Like at that point, typical Dane, he just came back from being on holiday, so he didn't have his shit organized, so I couldn't come away with a violin. But I think I'll be going there next week to rent a violin, a really good violin and a really good bow, or reasonable mass-produced violin, which I will then maybe next year swap for another one, because I really want 2 violins in the house. Because I want to start experimenting with my really cheap violin about putting flatter bridges on there for fiddling and just things like that. I've already changed my chin rest, and I changed my strings from day one. So now I'm really looking at technique wise with having a flatter bridge, and I don't want to do that and fuck it up on my only violin. So I really want a second violin in the house. And thanks to the guys who were arguing with me in the comments, guys, you really pushed me to work out what needed to be done. So I thank the guys who came forward and said that you completely disagree with me. Like, even though like I have a very strong opinion on renting, and that's what the arguments, guys, on the comments were. It's the renting. Like it's so against my ideas of money, like just renting something that is literally, if you just save for a little bit, like, you know, don't go out partying, don't go drinking, don't go eat McDonald's every second day. You know, you can buy a reasonable violin off the internet. But renting is dead money. Like, renting is like going to McDonald's, paying for McDonald's and not actually getting McDonald's, or eating McDonald's and then you have to vomit it back up into the bag and hand it back. Like, that's renting. Renting is like, that's slave shit. Like, it's zombie shit. Like I say, guys, don't be a zombie. So that's what I'm trying to say. Always try and find the deal where you're keeping that solid item, because you can always sell that item on. So when you've paid off that item and you're keeping it and then you want to get rid of it, you can always chuck it on eBay. You can always chuck it on your local, classifieds, Craigslist and stuff like that, and you can sell it. If you're just renting, you're just paying people money for nothing, just for the use. You can always do better deal than just being sucked into that bullshit. All right, guys. I guess this wasn't really even an episode. Yeah, it was an episode, but no playing, nothing deep. I just want to tell you that I really did I really went back and read the comments that a lot of you guys made, and I want to change my attitude, and I'm hoping I have. Like, I hope that by accepting that I could be wrong, that I've made a really good choice here. Like, yeah. So thank you so much for fucking telling me I was wrong, because I went out there and like the first two violin makers that I went with, like, I was confirming my bias so much. Like, these people terrified me. Like, I'm a confident man. I'm a confident person, and like, I even jumped in my car and I recorded this. Like, okay, guys. So we just went into a violin maker shop in Copenhagen, and so I have a year on the violin, and I'm a confident person as well. And I just walked in that shop and I pretty much watched the confidence drain out of me. That was not fun. Going into that violin maker, he pretty much told me that all his violins so I priced him at around 3,000 Australian dollars, so 15,000 Danish crowns, and he pretty much tried to usher me out the door, really. Yeah, and so like, I came out and I felt really embarrassed. So yeah. All right, guys. So thanks so much for changing my mind. I'm out. Bye.